Good morning. If you're watching this on Wednesday morning, almost forgot what day it is. Welcome to Wednesday morning, middle of the week. Today's video is about doing nothing, or how doing nothing, or apparently doing nothing, is one of the absolute best productivity tools you could hope to find. Because I know we've been told constantly that if you're not like visibly doing something, typing, having meetings, delivering something or other, making paper, like move from one place to somewhere else, then you're not really working. I know this is very much the case in every sector I've ever worked in, to be honest. Stopping looks like slacking. Stillness looks like falling behind. White space in the diary is white space that is just like begging to be filled with another meeting or some other kind of obligation. So you keep going. You answer the email when you're sitting on the sofa trying to watch telly. You think about work in the bath. You feel a flicker of guilt any moment they are not like producing anything. Here's what I want to put to you today. And I know it kind of sounds counterintuitive and like a contradiction, but the most productive thing you could do, let's go with today, start you off simple, is absolutely nothing. I'm not talking about taking a break for like self care or rest, although obviously, please, yes, always do those things. I'm not talking about like the downtime you feel you've earned when you treat yourself to some space and some rest because you've achieved so much stuff or you've finished projects. I mean, doing nothing as a deliberate business strategy. So, empty space as productivity tool that helps take your business to the next level, as the actual mechanism by which your best thinking happens. That's what I'm talking about this morning. And I'm Annette Corbett. I'm thinking partner for women founders who have become the bottleneck. Can't even speak this morning. Thinking partner for women founders who have become the bottleneck in their own business. And you're watching, it's called The Thinking Partner, which is the name of this video series. And it's a weekly series exploring the evidence and the facts behind what happens when you don't give yourself space to think and what becomes possible when you do give yourself space to think. I've been really enjoying putting these videos together as well. It's a new channel. So get into the really sciencey stuff. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network. We're going to call it DMN for short. It activates specifically when you're not focused on a task. So when you're daydreaming or walking without a particular destination in mind, or staring out of a train window at the rain, or in the shower, thinking about absolutely nothing in particular. Apparently, for a long time, this was just assumed to be the brain like switching off and kind of idling, not doing anything much of anything. But it turns out that's not the case. That's completely wrong. The DMN, default mode network, is doing something quite specific and almost kind of magical and below your level of awareness. It's making connections. It's linking ideas that might seem unrelated on the surface. It's pulling together things that are kind of half noticed, half forgotten, half thought, and it's quietly piecing them together into something new. So this is the part of the brain responsible for what we call like insight. It's the genuinely fresh idea, the light bulb moment where it just goes and you think, that thing that arrives like sideways, slightly out of nowhere, that feels like some kind of random download almost from an external place when you weren't really trying to think of anything at all. That's really important. But that fact about how it feels like idling, um, that feels important to come back to, because your DMN cannot do this stuff while you're actively focused on something. That's why I talk about this idea of like you're not trying to think of anything. It can't do it while you're focused on doing and tasks and productivity and delivery. The DMN and your task focused, oriented thinking, they essentially kind of take turns to function. So when one is switched off, the other one's taking a back seat, which means if you never stop, the DMN, the one that is good at making the connections, doing the lateral thinking, coming up with the fresh, new, creative ideas, if you're always doing stuff, that never gets a turn to function. You take a sip of water while I let you think about that, or you're trying to think about it. So there's a researcher called checks notes, Jonathan Schooler, who he studied something called incubation. And this is where I check notes because I want to make sure I get it right. And this is what happens when you like step away from a task or a problem rather than just kind of constantly trying to grind away at solving it or doing it. And what he found is that when people took a break, people who let their minds wander rather than kind of staying locked in on a problem, they were significantly more likely to have like a genuine creative breakthrough afterwards, not despite stepping away, but because they were stepping away. And that's the science behind this sort of DMN idea. And I'm sure it's something you've experienced like 1,000 times that you just haven't really maybe thought about. You're stuck on a problem. So you reach that point of giving up, going away, making a cup of tea, going for a walk. If you're anything like me, maybe you wash some dishes, do something around the house if you work from home. So it can have its benefits. And the key thing is, whatever it is that you do to step away, you've stopped thinking about this problem like on purpose. You've stopped trying to solve this problem. And somehow the answer just like arrives unannounced, fully formed. That's not a coincidence. And it's not magic, despite me thinking it's a little bit magical. That's your default mode network. Finally getting this space to do the thing that it does best, make connections, put together half thought ideas, and it does the stuff that your focused and like effortful pushing through brain never really could. I was thinking about Archimedes, which he didn't make the connection about was it water displacement, isn't it? Whatever the proper term is. He didn't do that while he was scribbling away at a wax tablet or whatever it was they wrote on. He made it in the bath. As we know, it's a very famous story, even if you know absolutely nothing about the science. The bath thought was this mechanism going to action. And the mechanism requires you to actually stop. Stop doing the ding, step away. And this is why I think this matters for founders specifically, because founders are often in a place where we are constantly doing, especially if you're a founder with a small organization. The thinking that this network, this DMN, supports the connecting of distant ideas, the creative leap, the strategic insight that comes out of nowhere, this is exactly the kind of thinking that founders use or need to use. It's this kind of thinking that distinguishes you as a founder from someone who's just like an employee executing a job description. Don't get me wrong, initiative, creativity, very important in any role, especially also if you're also an employee. None is never a bad thing, but a founder is kind of relying on this stuff. It's the vision, it's the pivot you didn't see coming until you suddenly did. It's the way of solving a problem that you've been stuck on that you just hadn't thought of, or that maybe someone else hadn't thought of in this slightly different kind of perspective. And it's neurologically like impossible to access on demand. You can't kind of force out these thoughts like some kind of creative constipation just by sitting at your desk for longer and pushing harder. It just doesn't really work like that. It only shows up when there is space, when there's, when you actually stop. So I wrote down an example for this. I was trying to think about, or proof, I guess, because it feels so counterintuitive. So the example is Jeff. I'm assuming his surname is pronounced Weiner. I haven't checked. But basically, he's the former CEO of LinkedIn. And you may well be watching this on LinkedIn. He's built this company, this thing that's worth billions. And he used to run his calendar exactly like a lot of founders do, back to back, working squillions of hours a week, every slot full. The moment he arrived to the moment he left, was just stuff and doing and things and meetings and And he found that it was actively making him worse at his job. So he changed it. And apparently, I actually don't know what role he's in now. I haven't checked, but apparently he now blocks out between like 90 minutes and 2 hours of just completely empty time in his calendar. So every single day, it might be broken up into smaller chunks across the day, or it might be a big chunk of time. No agenda, no task, just space. And apparently, he's called it the best investment he's ever made in himself. I know what you might be thinking. Yeah, that's a guy who's got loads of money. He's running a company with thousands of employees. I'm running a team of like 3 people and 2 casual staff and various subcontractors. And I'm wearing 6 different hats before lunch. It's not the same. You're right. Of course, it's not the same. You don't have that kind of infrastructure. But if someone with that scale of responsibility, that many people who could justifiably want to call on him and ask him questions at any moment, if he's decided that 2 hours of nothing every day is non-negotiable, it's worth paying attention to. And it's worth asking what that says about how you run your diary and maybe where you can make some space. Because if it's good enough for the CEO of LinkedIn, probably good enough for the rest of us as well. Which means if you as a founder are never allowing yourself to properly stop, you aren't being more committed to your vision, you aren't being more dedicated, you aren't even like, even if you're like being more hardworking than anyone else, you're cutting yourself off from the exact kind of thinking that your business most needs from you. So if you're treating those spaces in the diary as only allowed if there's nothing else calling for your attention, or as only permissible once you've got everything else done and you might be able to squeeze in 10 minutes, I want to suggest that maybe you've got the order backwards. Rest space isn't the reward at the end of the good thinking, it's a precondition for it. Doing nothing properly on purpose, it's not being unproductive, it's not a gap in your productivity. It's quite literally where some of your best thinking is being like assembled by this default mode network, entirely out of view, entirely out of your awareness sometimes, while you're not trying to think at all. When you're trying, you're not forcing, you're not, it's not effortful, it's allowing the nutrients of your thinking to kind of come together. So as usual with these videos, I am going to offer one question to take away with you, just to invite you to think about doing nothing. When did you last properly do nothing? Not just work related, but I mean in your life at all. Now, I know you're probably someone who's spinning 1,000 plates. I totally acknowledge that. I still want you to ask yourself the question, when did you last properly let yourself do nothing? No podcast in the background while you're walking, no fiddling on your phone, checking emails or scrolling through Facebook or whatever, no television, no half working in the background, just stillness, stopping, going for a walk without your phone on, staring out of a window. And if you're really struggling to remember, if you can't remember the last time you did that, then that's probably the point. So that's the end of this video. I'll be here next Wednesday with another piece of this story, this evidence. And if anything I've said here has hit a nerve, if you've been treating space to think as something you have to earn or something that ought to be filled, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a comment or a message. And if you're watching on YouTube, there's a handful of videos now so far. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'm going to start putting some like random stuff in as well, because these videos feel very formal for me, because I've thought about what I'm going to say, when often my videos tend to be a little more free form where I'm just riffing off an idea. I want to come back to that as well, because those are really fun to do. Next week we're going somewhere that feels kind of like an extension of this idea of how doing nothing is doing something. You know how they say you should like sleep on something? I've always been intrigued about that one. So is that actually a thing? So I've done a little bit of research. And I'm going to answer the question. Well, I'm going to talk about the science of why sleeping on a decision actually does work and is actually a real thing. So if you're intrigued about that, if you're someone who does tend to wake up with solutions or brand new ideas in your head and you've wondered how that works, then show up next week and I'll tell you about it. In the meantime, take care of yourself and